This is the recording of pages 89 to 94. We've got Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. We began our study of history by learning about a jumble of clues that made archaeologists scratch their heads. The clues pointed toward an ancient civilization. At first, the archaeologists believed this ancient civilization was the fabled city of Babylon, a place known to modern man through legends in the pages of the Bible. The closer the scholars looked, the more they realized those clues were actually pointing back in time to a civilization even older than Babylon. That trail led them to ancient Sumer. But as we've learned, the city-state of Babylon came to dominate Mesopotamia in the centuries after Sumerian culture faded. Under the rule of Hammurabi in the 18th century BC, Babylon became a great center of government and trade. Now we're going to zoom forward about 1,000 years from the time of Hammurabi. Even after so many centuries, Babylon was still around. In fact, not only was it still there, it was grander than ever. By about 600 BC, Babylon had risen to its greatest glory. The Babylonians built on the achievements of Sargon, Hammurabi, and the civilizations that preceded them to create a glorious city and sprawling empire with grand palaces, a towering ziggurat, lush gardens, and mammoth walls with splendid gates. Even today, the name Babylon fires the imagination with visions of ancient grandeur. Babylon, gate of the gods. And then as you can see, here is in the world, the area that we're talking about. So to weary travelers making their way across the parched land of Mesopotamia, the great city of Babylon was an impressive sight. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus was suitably impressed. After visiting Babylon, he declared it surpasses in splendor any other city of the known world. The splendor of Babylon came from its great trading wealth. That wealth was based on the city's favorable location, sitting as it did astride important trade routes. Like spokes on a wheel, trade routes stretched out from Babylon to the outer great commercial centers of the ancient world, down to the Persian Gulf, across to the ports of the Mediterranean, deep into the interior of Asia Minor. And you can see on the map over here. Okay, Babylonia, kind of very well situated. Babylon stood on the banks of the Euphrates River. Every day, cargo-bearing ships sailed down the river to dock at the city's bustling harbor. The busy waterside and the markets of the city buzzed with the languages of people from all over the Middle East. The Euphrates not only brought trade, it also brought life to the parched land. The Babylonians, like the Sumerians centuries before them, channeled the water of the river in canals and used it to irrigate their grain fields. And like the Sumerians, the people of Babylon used the mud of the riverbanks to build. Toiling in what was probably the ancient world's greatest brick-making industry, gangs of workers packed thousands of molds with mud that dried into bricks in the hot sun. From these mud bricks the city was built. For good reason, then, the Babylonians revered the Euphrates. Some even regarded it as a deity. But as you probably suspect by now, this was a city of many deities. In fact, Babylon means gate of the gods. And to worship them, the city was filled with temples, each dedicated to one of the various gods of the Babylonian people. Babylon was also an imperial capital. Its huge royal palaces proclaimed that this was a city at the heart of a powerful empire. It had been the capital of Hammurabi's empire during the second millennium BC. And this box over here is Herodotus, the father of history. Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century BC, was the first Greek historian. As a young man, he traveled in Greece, the Middle East, and North Africa. Everywhere he went, he asked people about their customs, their beliefs, and their past. He wrote down much of what he learned in books, which are considered the world's oldest known volumes of history. Today, Herodotus is often called the father of history. You'll meet him again when you study the ancient Greeks. All right, let's come back to Babylon. Little survives of Hammurabi's capital city, however, as his empire declined shortly after his death. But 12 centuries after Hammurabi, a new king rebuilt Babylon as the capital of a new Babylonian empire. His name may be familiar from the pages of the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar, the conqueror and builder. Nebuchadnezzar was a warrior king. During his 43-year reign, which lasted from about 605 to about 562, he was often at war with his neighbors, defeating their armies, sacking their cities, and increasing the size of his empire. His first target was Egyptian armies in Syria. You'll study the rise of Egypt in the next chapter, but suffice it to say that at this time, Egypt was powerful. Like Babylonian kings before him, Nebuchadnezzar thought of all Mesopotamia as his backyard. So when the Egyptians marched an army into the area around the upper Euphrates, Nebuchadnezzar attacked the Egyptians. So here's the Euphrates, and so it was up in this area that the Egyptians came, and he wanted to get them out. And like their ancestors in ancient times, brick makers in 21st century Iraq still shape clay into bricks and set them to dry in the hot sun. So that's still going on today, that brick making. They went to Egypt and sent them scurrying back toward their own river, the Nile. Nebuchadnezzar then set out to conquer Syria and make it part of the growing Babylonian Empire. His empire stretched from the borders of Egypt to the Persian Gulf and along the Mediterranean coast of what is now Lebanon. A determined and ruthless warrior, he let nothing stand in his way. When the Mediterranean port of Tyre refused to surrender to him, he laid siege to the city, a siege that lasted 13 years. Nebuchadnezzar could be ruthless in battle, but he did more than vanquish his enemies. He was a builder too, and during his rule, Babylon shone like a polished gem. The new capital rose by the shores of the Euphrates, a majestic city home to more than 200,000 people. And then on the map on the previous page, take a look at that. Nebuchadnezzar was proud of his role as builder, but humble about his service to the gods. He left inscriptions on thousands and thousands of bricks, such as Palace of Nebuchadnezzar, King of Babylon, who lives under the protection of Nabu and Marduk, son of Nabopolassar, King of Babylon. With great enthusiasm, he set about making Babylon surpass the glory days of King Hammurabi. Ever the soldier, he realized that first and foremost, the city had to be secure. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon would be the most solidly protected city of its day. And take a look at this picture here. During the military campaigns Nebuchadnezzar had spent much time trying to destroy his enemy's defenses, so he understood the importance of strong city walls. He fortified the sturdy double wall that encircled Babylon and built an outer wall beyond that. The outer wall was said to be so wide that 2 chariots could be driven past each other along the top. So along the top up here. Rising from some of these walls were defense towers, which served as battle stations. When the city was under attack, archers would climb into the towers and rain arrows on the enemy. Still, Nebuchadnezzar wanted more. Around the city's outer wall, he built a moat. But unless it had water, a moat was nothing more than a ditch. Where could he find water in the desert? Again, the Euphrates provided the answer, flooding the moat with its precious water. Bridges spanned the moat, allowing people to cross back and forth to the city. However, the bridges could be quickly dismantled during times of danger. 9 gates led through the walls into the great city. Each was named for one of Babylon's gods. Nebuchadnezzar fortified these entranceways with massive cedar doors plated with bronze. Grandest of all the gates was the gate of Ishtar. You may recall Ishtar from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Ishtar was the Babylonian goddess of love and war, and the magnificent Ishtar Gate reflected her importance. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt it 3 times, each time on a grander scale. The gate was decorated with tiles in a variety of brilliant colors. Across its walls marched images of strutting bulls and strange dragon-like creatures with a serpent head, feline front legs, and eagle talons on the back legs. Passing through the Ishtar Gate, visitors entered the processional way. The great thoroughfare led through the heart of Nebuchadnezzar's city. On its walls strode 120 enameled lions, the animal that represented the goddess Ishtar. Traveling along the processional way, visitors could see the glories of the city all around them. Great brick temples and the king's luxurious palace dazzled the eye. Nebuchadnezzar restored many of the city's temples, adorning them with precious metals, polished woods, and valuable gems. He paid special attention to the temple of Marduk, Babylon's patron god. Marduk was the great lord of heaven and earth, the chief god of the Babylonians, who was worshipped for his wisdom. Inside Marduk's temple, Nebuchadnezzar built a chamber fit for the deity, painted with dazzling colors. I made its walls gleam like the sun with shining gold, declared the king. With lapis lazuli and alabaster, I clothed the inside of the temple. A tall statue of the god presided within, covered with gold and dressed in the finest clothes and most ornate jewels. Babylon's 7-story ziggurat also received improvements. This great landmark could be seen for miles around, a symbol of the city that seemed to reach to the very heavens. Some believe that this was the Tower of Babel referred to in the Bible. And here's one of the carved dragons that was on the walls of Ishtar. And then this is the Tower of Babel as a multi-story ziggurat. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar also restored the city's palaces. These were places of luxury and symbols of royal power. He filled them with beautiful fabrics, silver vessels, gold ornaments, and the best wines, all the treasures of a mighty empire. Slaves stood ready, awaiting his every command. The king's favorite dwelling in the city was the great southern palace. There, his immense throne room faced north onto the largest courtyard. This provided the monarch with as much shade as possible from the blistering Mesopotamian sun. The seat of my kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar called his beloved palace, the dwelling place of joy and gladness. Yet still another marvel stood close by. In a city filled with wonders, this one was perhaps the most wonderful of all, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar's Hanging Gardens. King Nebuchadnezzar achieved many great things in his life. He conquered neighboring lands, forged a mighty empire, and rebuilt Babylon into a splendid capital city. But one marvel stood above them all, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. These were elegantly terraced gardens, watered by the Euphrates, as an ascending stair step to the sky. Why did Nebuchadnezzar build them? According to legend, one thing worried the invincible king, one problem he had been unable to solve, the unhappiness of his young wife, Amytis. Read the legend of his dilemma and his still famous solution. And we'll pick up this story in another reading. So that's the end of reading pages 89 to 94.